Hello, I'm Shon Kokoszka, president of Keller Company, where our mission is to build careers worth having, businesses worth owning, lives worth living, and legacies worth leaving through extraordinary results. Now, we obtain those extraordinary results through our training and coaching programs. Now, we have a great deal of respect for your investment of time, and we don't take that lightly. In fact, we have three very important goals today. First and foremost, to identify the problems that exist in corporate America or even your business right here, right now. We're going to talk about how large your life can be, and then we're going to focus our energies in to narrow that focus to identify the number one priority for you right now, today. And I'd like to introduce some of the co-facilitators right here, right now, and that is the Executive Vice President of Keller Company, Don Hobbs. Welcome to the webcast.
Thanks, Sean, and everybody. It's good to be here.
And we also have Frank Klesitz with Viral Marketing. He's the CEO of Viral Marketing, and he's the one who helps us put all these wonderful things together. Welcome to the call, Frank.
Thanks, man. I'm here to ask. I'm here to facilitate. If you have any questions, we have a great Q&A app here, so feel free to ask a question, and when the time comes, I'll ask Sean and Don to get it answered here for you. So feel free to use that.
Excellent. And also, Frank, I understand this is recorded, and we're going to be rebroadcasting this on a repeated basis.
Yep,
so
that's correct.
When you like what you hear, feel free to forward out these recordings to all your friends and family. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is really what today is all about, is to give you the information about this teleseminar series. What we took is the core teachings of this book, The ONE Thing, which, as many of you know, is #1 best-selling book, and it really helps solve some of the problems going on in general business today. And this teleseminar series is a 12-call process. It's done telephonically, where you get workbooks, you get to follow along, and we've identified 12 key talking points to allow you to live a more productive life with fulfillment. So let's dive into the problems. And Don, what do you suppose is really going on with people in general business today?
Well, you know, Sean, I think that the book has hit so hard because it actually hits the business world, and I think executives have read the book. You know, I get on airplanes, and it's comical to watch. You know, there's a book, and there's the book. It's still out there. You know, it's really hitting hard. And I think that the general business world has looked and said, we know our people aren't as productive as they can. We know that our society, with our gadgets and our gizmos and our, you know, text messages and voice messages, and it's like there's a lot of stuff coming at us, and everybody's got that same challenge. And of course, if I'm the employer, I'm thinking my people are getting lost in a lot of minutia, and I'm losing a lot of time. Frankly, that's ultimately, we'll talk about that later on. You know, how much time are we losing in our employee base? And I think on a personal side, you know, to add one little mention to that, on the personal side, people are seeing their lives out of control for the very same reasons. I mean, honestly, it's just which side are you on, the employer or the employee? But I mean, life is complex. There's a lot of stuff going on. I know for me, it's always been a challenge to try and figure out how do you get to the end of the list, right? How do you get to the end of all the things there are to do? And you may have a full day, and yet did you really accomplish what you set out to accomplish? And
I think many people end up mistaking movement for achievement. I think you would agree, because they're focused on that to-do list. Now, if you're like me, then of course we get a payoff when we get to cross something off the list, right? And it releases these positive endorphins. It makes us feel great, like we're accomplishing something. Yet because of that feeling and that endorphin that we crave so much, we end up tackling the easiest things first. And rarely do we get around, you know, identifying the one priority item. When we do that, that thing that would have taken 15 minutes otherwise is no longer even necessary, right? So good. Thank you, Don. What else would you add to the challenges
I think that's
of
really,
today?
Sorry, John. I think that's what you really hit on, is that you know, we're doing things, and you know, even if we give us credit, right? We're out there in the world and we're trying to do the best we can. We get this list. First of all, there's an excellent chance we're not putting a list that makes a lot of sense. We'll talk later about, you know, the difference between a to-do list and a success list. But the bottom line is, you know, we're even if we came up with a flawless list, by 8:30, 9 o'clock, some fires come up and blown the whole thing up. So we really are in a place where it doesn't feel like it's in our control. And what we want to do, and what the ONE Thing really is all about, and certainly this teleseminar series is all about, is getting back control. and ultimately how to do a lot more by doing a lot less, and that's really what you're talking about.
Exactly. Now, many of us have heard Pareto's principle before. It's the 80-20 rule, right? Meaning 20% of the activities on our to-do list will actually yield at least 80% of our results. And when you think about your to-do list, I want to just pop something up here on the screen for people so they can get a visual of what I'm talking about as it relates to Pareto's principle. And let's take a look at your to-do list, for example. You've got 25 things to do. Now, if you apply the 80-20 principle, well, then that brings it down to 5, because 25%, or 20% of 25 rather, is 5. And if you go extreme with your Pareto process, well, then that 20% of 5 ends up being just one thing. And really, how do we end up getting there? And we've got some proprietary tools that we'd like to share with you. First and foremost, at the core of the book, this humble little question, we call it the focusing question. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? I want you to view that question in 3 different parts. So the first would be, what's the one thing I can do? Meaning, I can do it. It's in my skill set. It's within my mindset, and I certainly have the financial wherewithal to do it. And then such that by doing it is kind of an actional, transitional statement. And then the last part is so critically important, meaning everything else will be easier or unnecessary. So one of the things I wanted to share with you all today is this extreme Pareto bracket that we put together that allows us to subdivide an activity. Because oftentimes people say, well, I've identified my one thing, right? Yet then they go into a time block session to actually focus on and accomplish that one thing, and yet they didn't realize that the one thing could be subdivided. For example, if I'm in sales, my one thing is probably lead generation, because everything starts with the generation of a lead, right? Yet lead generation can be subdivided, see? So I might identify lead generation, I'm going to do it from 8 to 10 every single day. Then I show up at 8 o'clock and I start researching phone numbers, start pulling my client list together. Next thing you know, it's 9 o'clock. I haven't done a single call because I'm still pulling it all together. I didn't subdivide the activity. So asking the focusing question is the one thing that's going to get you to the one thing. So lead generation. What's the one thing I can do about lead generation such that by doing that, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And Don, what might be the answer to that? Just give me an example.
Well, certainly for one thing, we could be planning it ourselves the night before and coming up with our list and having that ready to go so that at 8 o'clock in the morning when those calls start, I'm in it. I could also have somebody else that's in charge of that. I could put somebody in charge of that and say, you know what, when I show up to my desk at 8 o'clock in the morning, I want this list prepared every day for tomorrow, and I show up and I just do it. So it depends on where you are in your life and your business cycle.
Yeah, and done instinctively, you're starting to connect the dots, because if you say, okay, the one thing I can do is get my list together the night before. Well, what's the one thing I can do to get my list together the night before, such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? What we end up doing is identifying answers. What we're really doing is identifying the dominoes that exist, and we're actually starting to line them up appropriately. Now, I want to share something else with you, so I'm going to throw it up here on screen. It is the extreme Pareto bracket that not only allows us to identify the dominoes that exist in our world, it also allows us to identify the 20% of the 80%. Now, you can see here on the example, we selected a rather common goal that many people have, and that is running a marathon. So anybody who's ever run a marathon, and I'm certain there's several people on this webcast that have done that before, you know it's not just about strapping on your tennis shoes, right, tying the laces tight, and going out and running 26.2 miles. It's not that easy. So there are many dominoes that must be lined up in order for you to run a marathon. So we took the marathon example. We said, okay, so what are 5 things we could do to run a marathon? And then we establish priority. What is the number one thing that when I do that, the other 4 things becomes easier or unnecessary? And we selecting a running regimen. So what are 5 things we could do there? We identify 5 things. We establish priority, of course, bring it down the bracket. And that was time block training schedule. Then what are 5 things we could do to do that? See, in essence, what we're doing is subdividing it and identifying the dominoes. And we finally get down to an accountability level, which is coordinating with an experienced running partner or a coach. Now, take a look at everything else on that list. Not only does it become easier, many of those things become absolutely unnecessary. So the extreme Pareto is just one of the tools, one of the proprietary tools that you're going to pick up when you engage in the teleseminar series, which, by the way, very inexpensive. You can find information at theonething.com. And Frank, if you wouldn't mind just putting that in the comment section, that's with the number 1, theonething.com /teleseminar.
Got it.
All right. We'd love to have you on those. Now, beyond identification of the dominoes and lining them up for maximum efficiency, there are many other things that will distract us and get in the way of that. We call these the lies of productivity. See, we have the laws of success, right, which we're going to be talking about today, that are just like the laws of science. Let me ask you guys, you all believe in the law of science, right? The laws of science, rather.
I do,
like, for example,
absolutely.
Like oxygen, right, Frank?
Yep,
Like
I gotta breathe that every day.
You believe in oxygen, right?
I do.
Yeah, can you see it?
I can't.
No, you can see and feel the effects of it. Or like gravity. I mean, can you see gravity?
Can't see it.
No, you can see the effects of it. And the laws of success are just like that. So not only are there laws of success, there's also laws of failure. And each one of us, every day, we run the risk of averaging our lives by taking an average approach to what we want and an average approach to how we go about getting it. So what narrowing your focus means to me is ignoring everything you could do and truly focusing on what you should do. So rather than that to-do list, we all need a success list, a list that's purposefully chosen and put together based around extraordinary results. Bottom line is if your list is not built around extraordinary success, it's going to take you anywhere other than there. And these lies, by the way, the 6 of them, the first one is everything matters equally. So if we buy into that lie, well, then we end up buying into the second lie, which is that we can actually multitask, right? Because I've got so many things on my to-do list, well, I better start working on more than one at a time. Otherwise, there's just simply not enough hours in the day. Well, Clifford Nass did all the research on this. By the time he was done, he said, I was certain that multitaskers had some secret ability. Turns out that they're just suckers for irrelevancy. He said, multitaskers, even though they'd convinced themselves and the world that they could multitask, it turned out that they were just lousy at about everything. So bottom line is multitasking leads us to the next lie. Because we bought into the lie that everything matters equally, we start multitasking, and then we say things like, well, I just need more discipline in my life. And I'm going to hold myself accountable to that. Well, here's the point. Don't be a disciplined person. And the one thing, the top-level CEOs, executives, employees and department heads of Fortune 50 companies that we've had the pleasure of aligning with and coaching with, taking through our workshops and teleseminar series, they will tell you that there's something freeing about buying into a singular priority, focusing all of your energies and effort on that. Here's what happens. Productivity shows up. And the natural byproduct of focusing on your priority, having productivity, is profit. And I believe that's something we all strive for. So the next lie, willpower is always on will call. And Don, why don't you talk about willpower always being on will call for a moment?
Well, willpower is an interesting thing because it seems to have always been a call for like character. Like you don't have any willpower. It's like there's a fault. And the reality is that willpower is very closely related, and all the research really shows that willpower comes and goes as energy. And it's no different, actually, than our cell phones, which, we wake up in the morning and hopefully we plugged them in last night and we got it all green. And then as the day goes on, it begins to get discharged. And we do too. And so willpower is really not always on will call, where we have these fluctuations. And, of course, that would imply, Shon, that we really need to figure out when our bodies, when we're physically most capable of making those choices, when our brain, by the way, which uses up about 20% of all of our energy, it's like a gas hog. In the car world, we call the brain a gas hog. It's only 20th or 50th of our body mass, and yet it just consumes. And so we wonder why at the end of the day we get home and we're exhausted. I mean, it's like, I'm so tired. Well, what were you doing? Digging ditches? I mean, not really, but it's all those decisions that we've made all day long that really become the drain on our brain. And so willpower is not always on will call, and unless we are constantly keeping ourselves refueled and rested, we will not be at peak efficiency. And what we also know, Shon, is that if we really want to have our one thing be achieved, and we really want to work on making ourselves most productive, we want to start figuring out when is our most productive time, and that's when we need to do the most important activities. Unfortunately, like I said earlier, we get into the office and the fire from the office comes up or some explosion happens, and what we were on task to do, we don't do now, and we push it off until 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon when we need that 5-hour energy drink to try and get our energy back up, and that's where the challenge lies. So I think that willpower is not always on will call, and we've really got to learn that. And part of this this series is about learning how to manage yourselves and manage yourself through these lies, these societal lies that you're talking about.
We got a question here I'd like to ask that's got voted up quite a bit. Is how can we let the people close to us who want to take up our time during the day that when we are on this mission to do my one thing without hurting them?
That's they're speaking to the first of the 4 thieves. And the first of the 4 thieves is the inability to say no. Now let's face it, I mean, saying no to the people that are close to us, the people that we care about, or even the causes that are important to us, and let's face it, it feels downright selfish and self-centered. At the same time, and this helps bring it into perspective for me, I don't know about you, I don't want to turn to my 3 kids someday and say, I'm sorry you can't go to that college, boys, or oh, I'm sorry I missed that touchdown that you scored last night. You know, Dad couldn't say no to the people that I should have. And it just gives me a different feeling, right? A different energy, which then allows me to focus on the priority. Another one of the things that really helps, I believe, most people is to truly understand purpose. Now, many of you might be able to relate to this type of a situation. Like maybe you've heard somebody's name over and over and over again in your industry, yet you've never met them face to face, and you've heard their name over and over again because of their productivity and the profit that they're generating. Now, you've heard it over and over. You've never met them face to face, and you finally go to a trade show or a seminar or something, and you finally get to meet them. For the very first time, you're excited, right? You may be even a little bit nervous, and you shake their hand for the very first time. And the only thing going through your head is, seriously? I mean, this guy or this gal, this is the one who's the 1%er who's always hitting the grand slam home run? How did that happen, right? Well, I promise you that they're crystal clear on purpose. Their why. I mean, why they do what they do every single day, which leads them to the ability to focus on the priority. And of course, the natural byproduct is productivity and profit. It's outlined in the one thing with the iceberg diagram. So what you see above the water surface is the productivity and profit of an individual, yet what we get to see above the surface, the 1/9 of the iceberg, is really truly supported and created by what we don't get to see, and that is their purpose, their why, in other words, and then finally their ability to focus on priority. See, the bottom line is when the why is powerful enough, the how, it simply shows up. So what would you add to that, Don?
I was going to say, Frank, let me add something to that, because I think the other piece, which I think Shon's identified so clearly, that priority is the key. We come from that place, we operate from that place, we create a different world. But I also think that in terms of how we address that with our loved ones, our family, you know, we've got to make time. And when you are on purpose, when you're on point, as Shon is describing, I mean, really, if you think about the world as it would come through what Shon's just said, I'm more efficient, I'm more on track, I'm not staying after hours, I've got more time for my family. But the reality is right now, for most people, we don't have any life. We have a botched up life at the office that's kind of, again, mistaking movement for achievement, and we've got a botched up life at home that is the catch-all of what's left. It's poor time. So I think really the reality is, how do we stay on point, stay on purpose, explain to the people around us, which is the toughest thing, hey, I just need this time, I'm going to have time with you later on tonight, you know, we make the promises of when we're going to be there, and then, by the way, we keep our commitments. But really, that's what this is all about. It's about how do we get to be on purpose, and in the moment, wherever we are, be there. You know, wherever we're supposed to be, whatever we're doing now, that's what we're doing now. And then when we're with family, we're with the special people in our lives, then we're there 100%, instead of being somewhat with nothing all day long.
That's excellent, Don. Thank you for that. Additionally, it's a great segue, by the way, into the next lie. Now, the only thing worse than buying into a lie in the first place is actually buying into lies that are built on lies. So again, if we start thinking everything matters equally, we start multitasking. When we're multitasking and we're not getting the result, well, then we say, I just need more discipline. The discipline approach isn't working. Well, it must be my willpower, right? And then because we're exhausted at this stage of the game, we start saying things like, I need more balance in my life. Now, anybody who's achieved extraordinary success will tell you that it's a balancing act. It's not about balance. It's about counterbalance. So for those key relationships, and I'll just use a simple example, oftentimes I travel, given what I get to do, taking the stage or facilitating a workshop or whatever the case is. And because of my best friend, my key relationship and my wife, when I get on the plane, I call her once I sat down and say, hey, honey, I'm getting ready to take off, right? Well, then as I'm in the air, I can't necessarily call her. Essentially, I'm moving away from the center line of balance, if that makes sense. And imagine that it's shooting away from this imaginary line of balance. When I land, of course, then I pick up the phone and I call again. In essence, I'm hovering around the center very tightly with that key relationship because it's so very critical to me. Now, each of your relationships has a different counterbalancing requirement. And through the One Thing teleseminar series, you're going to gain absolute and massive clarity on the counterbalancing requirement for each of the 7 key areas of your life. Now, Gary and Jay so eloquently described the 7 key areas, as we call it, the 7 circles. And applying the focusing question to that, let me put it up on screen here real quick. That is the 7 key areas of your life, beginning with your spiritual life, your physical health, because here's the bottom line. If you don't take care of your body, where are you going to live, right? And the next would be for your personal life. Now, a lot of people get hung up on this, saying, how could your personal life be more important than the key relationships of your life? Isn't that selfish? Well, the bottom line is, when you take care of yourself, you can take care of those key relationships at a much higher level. And what I'm talking to here is more of a hobby. And you see it in the flight attendants at the front of the airplane, right? They say, in the unlikely event of a cabin pressure change, 4 yellow oxygen masks may appear from the ceiling. And then they say, put yours on first. Well, wouldn't that be selfish? Come on, really? I'm going to put mine on first before I put my child's on. Well, the point is, if you don't put yours on first, you're not going to be able to take care of them very well. Then, of course, the next is for your job and your business and your finances. Now, a lot of people get hung up on the difference between job and business. Now, I want you to look at it like this. Maker time versus manager time. Working on your business instead of in your business. Focusing on the priorities and strategies of the business is definitely working in your business. Planning your priorities and strategies is working on your business. So it's just maker time, strategic thought time, if you will, that you invest on implementing the strategies, the plans, the catalysts that will cause your business to soar.
That's great.
And of course, for your finances, the one thing you can do. Now, apply the focusing question to each of these 7 key areas of your life. You'll look up 6 months from now, and actually take action, by the way. You'll look up 6 months from now, and here's what it's all about. You'll be living a life with no regret because you've identified the priority item in each of the 7 key areas of your life. You're taking action on it. That's what the teleseminar series is all about. It's about holding you accountable and able to take action on the 7 things you identify to live a life with no regret. Now, the natural byproduct is productivity and profit.
Right? So one of the questions, questions we had to answer, I want to answer the whole title and lead toward the whole title of the series here that was asked is, how does one best figure out their number 1 priority? I think you dived into that a little bit with their why. But how would you be able to answer that question for somebody who says, how does someone drill down to find out what is their one thing?
I think it's a great question, and the strategy that we'll use here is the brain dump strategy, meaning lock yourself in the room, pull somebody else in so you can brainstorm with them if required. Ideally, like a accountability partner, a mentor, or even in the highest form, like a coach, right? Where you complete a brain dump, meaning you list out all of your options, right, wrong, or indifferent. You just write it all down. I like using a whiteboard, right? And I'll come up with 30, 40, 50, maybe 100 things I could do to accomplish the result that I desire. And then asking the focusing question to really identify the one thing. What's the one thing on that list that when I do that, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? What you end up doing is you start whittling it down. You apply Pareto's principle for the first time. And then you establish priority and apply Pareto's principle again. And when you go as small as you possibly can, you're focused on one thing, the right thing. And that's your one thing in that moment of time. Now, common misconception of the book is that it's just one thing. It's not. It's one thing at a time. Success is sequential It's not simultaneous. Oftentimes people want to do everything all at the same time, and they end up mistaking movement for achievement. They got 25 things that they're working on at any given moment, not accomplishing a single one, right? They go and they leave the office at 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, get home, they're unfulfilled, and that's the problem that we're addressing here in today's world, is this feeling of unfulfillment. And I will tell you, the teleseminar series is going to give you the skill set, it's going to give you the mindset to truly narrow your focus to that one thing that you can do in that moment, so you can act appropriately in the moment and get the result that you desire.
What are the 7 things, Shon? You mentioned the 7 areas of your life. Am I asking? You mentioned there's 7 areas of your life. You have to have one thing for each. So it's not just one thing and everything else is 2 and 3. It's
right.
One thing of focus for 7 different areas that you have to counterbalance.
Yeah, and we touched on discipline a little bit, and the point of discipline is that you have enough discipline right now to achieve the results that you desire. What you want to do is just reserve your discipline and focus on things that you choose to create habits around. You know, F.M. Alexander said, people do not decide their future. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their future. So when you think about that, and you've identified the one thing in each of the 7 key areas of your life, then ask yourself, what's the habit that I'm lacking? Now, if we're honest with ourselves, we've all built habits at an unconscious level. Right? Meaning, consciously we set goals, no doubt about it, yet the conscious mind is the goal setter and the unconscious mind is the goal getter. So if what F.M. Alexander said is true, that people do not decide their futures, they decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures, wouldn't it make sense that we bring conscious awareness to habit formation? So that's another one of the things that we discuss in the One Thing teleseminar series. We have 12 weeks to get you to focus on building habits. Now we've all heard that it takes 21 days to build a habit, right? And the research, by the way, is really clear on this. Megan Oaten did the research out of the University of London in Australia, and they introduced dietary and exercise goals to a group of undergraduate students. Now, they tracked their progress. To get to that point of automaticity, where the discipline required to sustain the habit when it was about as low as it would get, the sweet spot was 66 days. Now, on the low end, it was 18 days. On the high end, it was 274 days. Yet the sweet spot, the average, if you will, was 66 days. I'd encourage you all to go to theonething.com, click on resources, and there's a free download there. It's the 66-day habit challenge. So you outline the habit, and then there's 66 boxes. This came from Jerry Seinfeld, by the way, where when he became a comedian, his one thing was to write one funny joke and memorize it every day. And every day he did that, he put an X on the calendar, and he said, my only job is to not break the chain. Now here's what happens when you've got like 10 or 12 X's strung together. You already know. Your energy increases. You start gaining momentum, and momentum is one of the most powerful things that you can possess. In fact, a locomotive with 5 cars behind it, traveling at 55 miles an hour, it can break through a 5-foot concrete wall, reinforced by steel, and keep on going. Yet if you take that same train that's in a stopped position, you take a 1-inch block, you put it underneath the front wheel, it'll never get going at all. So the One Thing teleseminar series, again, is to start the wheels in motion, to help you gain momentum toward forming the right habits, the habits that you intentionally choose to drive your life to extraordinary results.
I put a link to those tools in the comments for anybody to get that 66-day challenge, as long as they'll have other resources to help them find and navigate to implement their one thing.
Great job, Frank.
Shon, real quick on the teleseminar series, I don't know that everybody gets this, but what I was totally impressed with when we began to do these, and I would watch people going through the process, is it's like being in a workshop. It's really not any that different than being right there in person, because they're working through these tools you're talking about. They're actually working it through in their lives in between. In the week, that space-time is great because they get a chance to live it in life. And on the actual teleseminars, there's interaction. They're coming up with what they learned from last week. It's very interactive. So don't think it's a one-way street or a lecture. It's not that. And I would really encourage people to get involved, because it is a life changer to start really getting clear about what your one thing is in each area, moving through breaking those lies, or shall we say your own beliefs about those things in your life. It really becomes about changing, true change, and not just about hearing good concepts. And that's really the big difference, right? When you go hear something and go, wow, that was great. But to work it, to live it, to be in it is a different story.
Well, I think we got some really great questions coming here that I'd like to get to, if that's all right, everyone. Thanks, Don, for that. John White asks, is the idea of the one thing in all areas of your life done at a particular time of day, or does it matter what time of day everything is complete?
Well, timing of completion of tasks is critical. We learned this based on the research of willpower is always on will call. There's that old saying that when there's a will, there's a way. When it actually, I believe, should be changed to when there's a will, there's a way, rather than where there's a will, there's a way. So, like Don had referenced the cell phone, right? See, your willpower is just like the battery on your cell phone. And the more complicated the apps that you're running, like for example, if I have Siri talking me directions all the way to where I'm supposed to go, I look down and it's drained by like 20%, right, depending on the distance of my drive, because it's running a very complicated app. Same thing with your willpower. If you're focused on your priority work and it's complex by nature, well then it drains your willpower battery down. And the point is that when our willpower is low, we end up falling back on our default settings. So timing of when you choose to do it is absolutely critical to me, right? So 8 to 12, that's your one thing time, right? And then 12 on is everything else time. So that's how we kind of view it. In fact, we're coming up with a product that is a chess clock that can go on your desk, where player number one in a chess clock scenario is your one thing time, right? And the chess clock for player number two is everything else time. So anytime you're focused on your priority work while player number one is ticking, the goal is to be at 4 hours every single day. That's the productive person's schedule, where they're focused on the priority work. Then at 12 o'clock, they hit player two, and then it starts ticking, right? The challenge, though, is that so many people, they say yes to distraction. Somebody knocks on their door, they say, hey, you got a second? And they say, yeah. What they end up doing is they switch task from their primary work. And let's just use a simple example. If let's just say I identified my one thing for the day was to send a 3-paragraph email out to all of my existing clients to gain referral business. That's just an example, right? And let's say I'm halfway through typing this. So I've typed out a paragraph and a half. Somebody knocks on my door and says, hey, you got a second? And I say, yes. What I do is I have to switch task from the primary work that I've identified for that moment in time, deal with the distraction, and then once I'm done with the distraction, then I have to switch task from the distraction back to my primary work. Now, if you're like me, what do you have to do with that email?
Read it.
Yeah, you have to reread the whole darn thing, right? Just to get back into that train of thought. Now, researchers estimate due to these inefficiencies, these moments, it adds up to 28% loss of productivity. So think about this. You're working for 5 days a week, and really you're only getting credit for less than 4. I mean, what would you do with a full day back in your schedule every single week, 52 plus days per year, call it 65 days per year of productivity? What would that do to your income? What would that do to your lifestyle? Think about it. Right? Mm-hmm. Powerful, no question about it. So again, the teleseminar series is going to give you the strategies and the tools and the models that when you implement that you end up becoming more productive, and the natural byproduct is profit. Now you might say, well,
Brian Williams asks, I want
go
to
ahead.
interrupt if that's okay. Brian Williams asks, because you bring up the teleseminar series quite a bit, which is great. Why don't you just let everyone know, how do they sign up for that, and what is the cost? And the link is up on the site. But I believe you go to the one thing, the number one thing, so THE one thing.com.
Yeah.
And then you go to teleseminars.
Yeah, right? Let me just pull this thing down here real quick. First off, you get an extra copy of the book to give out to your friends or your family to allow them to become more productive. You get this binder here. I just want to show you. It just says My One Thing on it, and you track all of your homework assignments, and each week we send you over the workbook that you follow along with. You have an opportunity, even though it's a group format, to participate actively on those calls. We take 3 participants, and then at the end of each session, we have a fun Q&A section, which really turns out to be some powerful coaching moments. And we have the pleasure of assisting people with clarity. See, clarity, by the way, is power, and it's absolute power. And by the way, anywhere you have growth within your organization, within your position, within your mindset, well then it creates complexity. Complexity is the enemy of clarity. And bottom line is, if you have mist in your mind, it becomes the fog within your organization, within your team. And by the way, how fast can you run in the fog? It's pretty challenging. So we have the pleasure of aligning with individuals to assist them with clarity through proprietary tools such as goal setting to the now, GPS, 411, and then time blocking for the highest level of productivity, protecting the time block and assisting them with accountability. Now, I mentioned goal setting to the now just a moment ago, and I want to just once again do a quick screen share to give you just an idea of what we're talking about as it relates to long-term strategy. See, I want you to imagine that this dot in the lower left is where you are today. And then the dot on the right is where you choose to be in both personal work effectiveness and what you want your life to look like. So a long-term strategy, a long-term vision of what you want your life to be, say 15 years down the road. Now, once you gain clarity around that, we all know that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, right? So the challenge in business, though, is that what we end up doing instinctively is we make the next logical step, and the next logical step, the next logical step, so on and so forth, and it can actually bring us further away from the long-term vision, yet in the moment it feels like the most appropriate thing to do, and I've certainly fell victim to this many, many, many times. Yet the problem is a lot of people either run out of time or they run out of energy before they get to that long-term vision. So rather, goal setting to the now allows you to first identify what can you do right now that will make everything else easier or unnecessary as it relates to the accomplishment of this someday goal. What can I do today? What can I do this week? What can I do this month? What can I do this in 6 months? What can I do this year? That when I do that, it makes everything else easier or unnecessary as it relates to the accomplishment of the someday goal. Then what can I do in 3 years? What's the one thing I could do in 5 years that when I do that, everything else will be easier or unnecessary as it relates to my 3-year goal, my 1-year goal, my 6-month goal, my 1-month goal, my 1-week goal, my daily goal, and even right now, what's the one thing I can do? Now, the 5-year goal, by the way, you're not big enough to do that right now, right? Meaning, what's the one thing I can do? I don't have the skill set yet. I may not have the mindset yet. I may not have the financial ability yet. With the appropriate actions, by lining up my dominoes, in 5 years' time, I'll be able to do just that. So that in and of itself is goal setting to the now. What we do on our teleseminar series is we get to ask you the appropriate questions that allow you to gain clarity. And the bottom line is that the quality of your life and the quality of my life is directly determined by the quality of the questions that are asked of us or that we ask ourselves. So once we've identified the 1-year goal, then we transition into a 1-page simplistic business plan that we call a GPS. And it's a single page. So you outline the 3 priorities that you must accomplish in order to accomplish the goal. Now, priorities are conceptual by nature, not necessarily grounded in action. And then under each priority, you outline 5 strategies. Now, these strategies are grounded in action. You assign by who and by when. This allows you to build your team. This also allows you to build your organizational chart based in your annual goal. And you'll have clarity on this in the teleseminar series. I guarantee you that with the visuals, the workbooks that we provide to you. So I'm just giving you kind of a high-level overview of what that looks like. And then you've identified who you're going to be delegating to because it's about leverage. No one succeeds alone. And the bottom line is no one fails alone either. So make sure the people around you support the goal. And then it's about creating a 411, which stands for the 4 weeks of the month. That's the 4 of the 411. The middle one of the 411 represents the monthly goal or goals or objectives. And then the final one of the 411 outlines your annual goal. Now your GPS is what creates the 411. So whatever that monthly target is or targets are, well then we do the brain dump. What's everything you could do? Okay, what's everything you should do? And then we outline it week by week, specifically what are you going to do? It's a granular level of weekly accountability. And then it's a matter of time blocking. So that's high level, yet in the teleseminar series we have the time, thankfully, to really deep dive into that. And also, we may have a workshop coming to a city near you, so go to theonething.com and click on events and see if you can get in that full-day workshop, because you walk out that door with absolute clarity. You have your annual business plan completed, your goal setting to the now, and a 411 for that granular weekly accountability that I believe we all need. So we're kind of, go ahead, Frank.
That's all right, man. I got a really good question I can slide in right there.
Perfect.
So you have this momentum. You have this weekly, you have this 5-year goal. You have this weekly 411 with yourself for accountability. How do you attack things that break your momentum? Not a question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say through leveraged yeses, first and foremost. And Don, what comes to your mind first?
Leverage yeses. Sorry, you caught me.
All good things. Let me explain leveraged yeses. They're systems, checklists, kiosks, frequently asked questions, staff that you've delegated certain systems process to, systems manuals, things of that nature, which allows you to keep your no and still say yes at the exact same time. See, first and foremost, identifying the frustrations is critical. This is the first step of system formation. Now, a system, in my opinion, is by definition is simply a standardized process that produces a custom result. And oftentimes when I'm talking systems in a seminar type format, people will come up and say, okay, what systems do I need in my business? Well, I don't know their industry, I don't know their position, I don't know anything, yet I do know one thing, and that is that how to identify the systems that are lacking from your business, from your life, is first and foremost identify your key frustrations. See, because it's not you, it's not the people, it's not your clients, it's simply a lack of a system. What this does is it takes the blame out of it. Any victim language just leaves, because now it's about, okay, what's the system that's lacking that's causing the frustration? So it's not blaming somebody for something, it's just identification of the system. And now, so it's about fix, prevent, prevent. Meaning, so many people are firefighters. They just go in and they put out fires all day long. I'm going to put out that fire, then I'm going to do that, then I'm going to fix this, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to fix this, right? Rather, let's get into fix, prevent, prevent. So fix it once, just once. And then go to your team and say, what are we going to do about it to make certain that this never, ever happens again? And then, therefore, you've identified the system that was lacking. Then you create the system, you manualize the system, then you can effectively delegate the system.
That's great.
I hope that helped.
It does help. I'm taking it. I'm learning lots of great stuff.
Cool.
Great.
Any other questions, Frank, or should we keep going?
I included the URL for the teleseminar series, which is fantastic. Again, it's in the comments here, but maybe you're watching on YouTube, you don't see the comments. It's theonething.com, THE, numeral, thing.com. And I believe when you're there, you just simply select training and then scroll down and click teleseminars, and you'll see the sign up for that there. So I want to get that taken care of.
Thank you.
Love your answers. Everyone says they love your answers. John White asks, what are leverage tools that you use for reminders? Not sure what that means. You know what that means?
Well, for me, and this is just for me, and some of you may want to push back on this, and that's okay. For me, it's absolutely coaching. Coaching is what I leverage to make certain I do what I'm supposed to do, because here's the bottom line. Oftentimes we'll disappoint ourselves and we'll be okay with that. I mean, think about it, like a New Year's resolution that you set. Maybe it was to go to the gym 3 times a week, right? In the first week, man, you were gung-ho. And then 10 days later, you're going twice a week. And then 2 months later, gym, I have a membership, right? Or rather, though, if you invite your best friend or you hire a physical trainer or a coach, right, you end up showing up. And why? Because you don't want to disappoint somebody else. And so even though you're tired, right, you're going to go ahead and put on your shoes and your workout clothes and you're going to go to the gym, because you will disappoint yourself all the time without any regret. Yet when you disappoint somebody else, massive regret. So for me, it's about coaching. It's about accountability. And that's the third of the 3 commitments. So the first commitment is committing to self-mastery, meaning approaching everything in your business with a mastery mentality, understanding that it's about time on task over time. It's about learning from your failures, failing your way forward. See, it's the smart person who learns from somebody, it's a smart person who learns from their own mistakes, right? The smarter person learns from the mistakes of others. And the smartest people of all, well, they learn from the successes of other people. So success leaves clues. I look at Gary Keller, who's my mentor, who also coaches me on a regular basis. And one of the reasons he's very successful is because he's always had a coach. He said there's 2 things that scare me. He says the man upstairs and not having a coach. Other than that, I'm good.
Good. Well, I think a good question here. I have a question. I'll submit mine.
Great.
I would like to know what everyone's morning schedules are. Because I think when I look at successful people and the implementation of the One Thing, it's really what you do before 8 a.m. even. So maybe 8 to 12 and 8 to 11 is your One Thing time, let's say. But there's probably a lot that goes on the first thing in the morning. Maybe could everyone share what they do the first thing every morning, what time they wake up, and just maybe that successful process. I think it'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. My morning schedule is oftentimes during the school season dictated by my boys' schedule. I've got a 15 and 14-year-old. Both of them are involved in Texas football at the high school level, and I will tell you that is wow. They have them on the field at 5:45 in the morning, right? So oftentimes my schedule is dictated by their training schedule, and that's okay because they're a key priority of mine, and I'm fine with that. Yet no matter what, if I have to have them at the field at 6 o'clock in the morning, well, I'll set my alarm 10 minutes earlier than I would have to get up to get out the door, right? And what I do, I set it early, 10 minutes early. I press the snooze button, not to be able to go back to sleep and slowly wake up, yet to just close my eyes and set the energy for the day, to plan my day ahead and give gratitude and thanks for it in advance of actually accomplishing it. What that does is it puts me in a gratitude state, and I will tell you that you can't be a victim and be in gratitude at the exact same time. And plus, it allows me just to set the tone, set the mood, set the accomplishments of the day, and again, giving thanks for it well in advance of it actually happening. So that's how I start my day every day. How about you, Don?
For me, thanks, Shon. That was great, actually. I enjoyed hearing that. For me, it starts off with first thing the alarm goes off, and I have created a new habit, one of my 66-day charts that you talked about that I got from the teleseminar series. And I went through and created a program for stretching because I'd hurt myself pretty badly, and one of the reasons for it was not stretching enough. I don't want to be old and crumbled over, so I begin to stretch. So first thing in the morning, Frank, I'm stretching. I get up after 15 minutes of stretching and get some food, some protein. I will then meditate and kind of let my body settle in that, meditate and pray. And again, Shon, that's a place where I come from gratitude and get a chance to listen to what's being brought to me and ask questions and all of that of one of my coaches. And then at that point, I may go work out, and I may have a workout later. It depends on what my schedule is that day, Frank, but I always have. I work out now probably 5 days a week, 5 days a week, even when I'm on the road. I make time for that. So that's generally speaking how it works out. And then in the office, typically right at 8 o'clock. And for me, what it feels like is I've already had a full day for me. And Shon, back to your earlier point, when you take care of yourself, you've got more to give to others.
Yeah, no doubt about it. See, here's the bottom line. When you spend the early hours of the morning energizing yourself, you get pulled through the rest of the day with little to no additional effort. One of the books that I'd recommend for everybody to read on this webinar or this webcast is this book here. I don't know if you can see it. It's The Miracle Morning. And it's written by a guy named Hal Elrod. I had the pleasure of completing a podcast with him recently, and that'll be posted to the One Thing podcasts here very, very soon.
Cool.
Hal is a very interesting young man. He, at age 20, was hit head-on by a drunk driver traveling 70 miles an hour, and was dead on the scene and was revived and was told by the doctors that he'd never be able to walk again. Now, I want you to think about this story and how it relates to the One Thing principles. See, when he's laying there in the hospital bed and can't even wiggle his toes, his one thing was simply to do that, wiggle his toes, right? Then the one thing became, okay, now I'm going to move my legs. Now I'm going to take my first step. Now what he's done, though, through this process of identifying the dominoes, setting interim goals and interim benchmarks, he's run an ultra marathon, which means that's 52 miles in a single day, right? Yet he's laying in his bed. He can't even wiggle his toes. See, and Gary outlines the hockey stick in the book. We call it the hockey stick because it's that momentum train where it's moving so slow at first you can't even notice that it's moving, and yet next thing you know it's going so fast that you can't even get it to stop, right? And it's that hockey stick kind of on its side, right? And it just shoots right up. Well, and he likens it to the domino run, where a 2-inch domino can knock over a domino that's actually 50% larger, so it can knock over a 3-inch domino, can knock over a 4.5-inch domino, right? And by the time it hits the 57th domino, it spans a distance from the Earth to the Moon. Now, he's lying in his hospital bed, and he's looking at that 57th domino, which is running an ultra marathon. Now, he can't do that in that moment of time, right? Yet by lining his dominoes up and understanding how small the lead domino is, wiggle my toes, right? And then the next domino is move my legs. Next domino is take my first step, you see? And then he's worked that all the way up to spanning that distance from the Earth to the Moon, which is running 52 miles in a single day. And guys, I will tell you that anything is accomplishable. In fact, Gary Keller encourages us all to think too big and then apply the One Thing principles and the proprietary tools that he's developed and used over the last 30 years, and you'll realize that any goal is accomplishable. And it's accomplishable with ethics, with integrity. And I just encourage you to dive into our training. You'll see that the teleseminar series is very inexpensive. It's like $119 a month for 3 months. You get that wonderful binder. You get all the workbooks that come along with it. You get a copy of the book. You get a ONE Thing keychain. You get a ONE Thing pen. You get a door hanger that you can put on your door that says, just in case I can't say no, this sign will have to do it for me. All of these little tools and strategies, plus you get the 66-day habit tracker on a ledger-sized piece of paper so that you can really focus in consciously choosing an intentional set of habits that you can build, own, and create extraordinary success in your life.
That's great. Well, is there anything you'd like to add, Don? This has been an incredible session for all of our viewers.
Well,
is there anything you'd like to say?
I hope that people get the feeling that, first of all, anything can be accomplished. And Shon, that was a great kind of a wrap-up to say anything can be accomplished. Whatever our goals are, as long as we line our dominoes up, we're not big enough to achieve probably what it is yet. But if we line those dominoes up, if we'll step back and think about what's the very next thing that I need to be doing, what's the one thing? And that was really the point of this whole webinar today. What's the one thing? And so I get those things lined up. Anything can be accomplished. We're far bigger than we know. We're far greater than we ever typically hit our potential. And part of it is, Shon, we've described it here, most people are just off track most of the time. They're on their way to New York, and yet somehow along the way they ended up in Cleveland, and it's or worse, I mean
Cleveland rocks, man. Come on.
Tulsa. I mean, I'm just saying it's
Clear yourself out.
Yeah, somewhere. But we're not going where we wanted to go, and we're doing it, and we think we're on track, and yet we're not. So this teleseminar series really puts people in a chance to control their lives, to get their lives back, and to put themselves not only in that place, but to say, I can do things that I never even dreamt of. In fact, the word that you used a lot that I loved was extraordinary, because it's really not having a good life. Many of us have settled for that. It's not even about having a great life. It's about having an extraordinary life. So that's what I think, Frank, is really the outcome of this. It's the thought that I want people to kind of leave with is, we can do that, and the question becomes, are you prepared, and are you ready, and are you willing to step up and make the choice for yourself?
And Brian Matthews says, I plan on attending the one-day event in Richmond, Virginia on October 23rd. I am also interested in signing up for the teleseminar series that starts in early October, honoring my time blocking and priorities.
That's great.
Honoring my time blocking and priorities, am I overlapping my time by going to the one-day event? Let me see if I can read that again. Honoring my time blocking and priorities, am I overlapping my time by going to the one-day event? Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you that your business grows to the extent that you do. And the one-day event is it is packed full of proprietary systems, models, and tools that when you implement it, you will get a huge ROI on that investment of time. Meaning you're going to invest a day there, yet you're going to get many days back as a direct result. I mean, we talked about it. You're losing 65 days already this year due to lack of efficiencies, or at least that's the average. Don't misunderstand me. Yet the one thing you can do to capture some of that lost time back is just engage in this training. Your business grows to the extent that you do. By the way, your business grows to the extent that your employees do as well. So if you have direct reports, I would encourage them, get engaged. Let's create a culture of productivity on your work team. Okay, let's get everybody there. See, your goal is not to keep up with the competition, right? Your goal is not to beat the competition. You're not going to beat the competition, by the way, running their plays. So you're going to learn benchmarking and trending strategies. See, the goal is actually to pound the competition into submission, right? And the only way you can do that is to come up with your own plays. And we're going to give you clarity on how to do just that, okay?
That's great.
So let's have some fun together.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for the great hangout today. I believe we're going to be continuing these on a monthly basis going forward. So check your email. If you received an email invite, that means you're on the list. Also, feel free to click follow here on the Google Plus page, Keller Company. So if you're following Keller Company, you'll get notifications of future events that are coming up. And also, if you go and you'd like to get email registrations of these future events, if you go to theonething.com and opt in for any of the free advice or the materials that are there, when we have your email address, you'll get that free bonus. But you'll also be on the list to receive notifications of upcoming complimentary training like this, which is great. So I want to thank everyone for being here, and we'll end this session here.
All right, Frank, thank you.
Frank.
Don, thank